I think I'm live. Well, hello friends. Welcome back to SerenityOS office hours. Hopefully the microphone is working. Okay, so it is Friday, and on Fridays we have office hours, which is where we talk about SerenityOS and related projects. James says that the gain is too high. Well, dang it, what did I change? Let's tweak that a little bit. Take it down just a tad. Maybe that's better. Is it better now? Is it better now? Okay. Let's see. Why is it so weird? Okay, how about this? Bringing it down. Now I'm not getting any red whatsoever, so it should be good. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so I've just been messing with all kinds of things while working on something else, and I screwed up my usual setup. Sorry about that, but sounds like we are back in the normal range. So hello everybody. Welcome back to Office Hours. If you're new to the stream, what we do here every Friday is we just talk about SerenityOS and any questions that you might have about the project, technical, non-technical, but as long as it's related to SerenityOS or the adjacent projects, everything is fair game. So, hello everybody, by the way. Thank you for helping me tune the mic. Hello. Umberto, Pierre with the golden yaks. Look at those. Sam, hey, how's it going? And Yeppy asking about the latency. So I always have it set to like ultra low latency. It is the lowest latency setting that I have, so it's the best I can do. But outside of that, it's really just up to YouTube to deliver it as quickly as possible to you. But I'm using a wired connection and everything on my side. Anyway, yeah, so Sam says that the gain is still a bit high or something. Let's just take that down just a tiny bit more. Just a tiny little bit more, because we have the budget. We can take it down. Okay, so now, hopefully now I'm not buzzy or dull or high or something. All right. Let's see. Well is asking, hi Andreas, how are you feeling today? I am feeling great. How are you? It is the end of the week, and although I tend to work on Serenity on the weekends as well, it's still, I like that there's the structure to the week, where there's the office hours on Fridays, and it just gives it that framework. Let's see. Johnny. Oh, Thomas was asking, hey Andreas, is this going to be a short live stream or a regular one? So it's going to be a 1 hour live stream. So as I mentioned last time, I'm switching the live streams to 1 hour, and then increasing the car talks. So this week I only had the opportunity to do one car talk, but I'm hoping to escalate production of those going forward, especially as more questions and subjects come into the comment box. So yes, it's a 1 hour stream. Johnny was asking, are you planning to implement a JIT compiler for the JavaScript virtual machine? If yes, will you use LLVM, CraneLift, or an ad hoc solution for code generation? So, as I always say, when somebody asks about plans, there is no plan one way or the other, but when it comes to JITting in particular, I am skeptical about the sort of the trade-off between complexity and benefit when it comes to just-in-time compilation of JavaScript. I think we've sort of been led to believe that it's absolutely necessary because we have these huge companies sort of competing in like a browser measuring contest, if you will, just trying to prove who can make the coolest JavaScript JIT. And the benefit on the vast majority of web content is basically none or irrelevant, and it really only targets like this tiny number of sites that do like more advanced application stuff in JavaScript. And all of that costs like an immense amount of complexity in browsers, and I'm not sure that that's the right architecture. And I wonder if we can, I would really like to explore if we can cover most of the web use case without the complexity of a just-in-time compiler and the security burden also of a just-in-time compiler. But in the long term, who knows? But in the short term, I feel like we have to explore maximizing performance within a simpler architecture before reaching for something as dangerous as just-in-time compilation. Let's see, Milan joining the Yak Herd. Thank you very much for the support. It does work. Very cool. Let's see, the Woo Woo says, I have Serenity and Ladybird in the same directory. When I change in libweb and build Ladybird, it doesn't pick up my changes. What do you do to make that happen? So I think the trick to make that happen is to make sure that when you build Ladybird, then you tell it where Serenity is on your machine. Because if you don't, it will download Serenity. So let's see. You have to tell it the Serenity source tier. Yeah, exactly. When you set it up with CMake. So if you don't do this, then it will automatically download a separate copy of Serenity, and we'll build Ladybird against that, and then you have two checkouts and changes are not reflected in the Ladybird repo. So definitely add that to your build flags if you want that. Cafe was asking, are you sitting in the car only for the video? Well, I try to combine it with some errand or task that I have to do. Although last night I did drive out just for the purpose of recording a video. But I like to drive out to my old rehab clinic and just sit in the parking lot outside when I record car videos. It's I don't know, it just puts me into this introspective headspace, and I find it kind of humbling, I guess, in a way, to go back to rehab. But even if I don't go and participate in the rehab program, just to go there and sit in that environment, even outside in the parking lot, is somehow helps me think. Let's see. Sophia says, time for some officing. Indeed. James says, personally, I find JIT and anything to be scary. Look at WebKit. Many exploits are dealing with JIT. And for how much performance gain? Performance gain in real-world applications, not just random tests that are super specific. Right. That is indeed one of my big concerns about JITting. And at the same time, like, it is undeniable that there's a lot of web content that benefits, relatively speaking, from JIT compilation. Like, sites are busy running JavaScript, and websites throw a lot of JavaScript at browsers. But if you look at something like the UI WebView widget on iOS, it's not allowed to use the JIT because you can embed it in your application, and iOS famously does not allow apps to run a JIT in process. So, but like many apps on iOS still use UI WebView and forgo having a JIT, and they still manage to, render web content in an acceptable way for the most part. So, I think there's a very high ceiling on non-JITted performance, and the a JavaScript core is quite sophisticated, even when running without a JIT. And I know that we can definitely employ a lot of the same tricks to go a lot faster. Let's see. Sufi Bros was saying, would you consider AArch64 for your main Serenity machine, like a Raspberry Pi or Pinebook? I guess I would consider anything for my main Serenity machine. I don't really care one way or the other. The thing I do care about is compiler performance, because what I do most every day is just compile stuff. Let's see. Sophia says, when WASM is more widely adopted, that may alleviate the need for JS jitting. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting potential future to consider. If the performance pattern 5 years from now has become sort of do performance irrelevant things or like non-sensitive stuff in regular JavaScript, and when you need guaranteed performance, then you go down to WASM and run like an optimized little chunk of code that is guaranteed to be fast in every browser. I feel like that would be a very interesting future. I don't know if that's where things will go. Ultimately, the web is a very living organism with a lot of moving parts and interested parties, but from our perspective as a underdog browser vendor, if you will, it would be very, very good if the web as a whole sort of moved away from depending on JITted JavaScript for performance and would narrow the scope down to, well, websites are going to use WASM whenever they need performance. So as long as you have an optimized WASM implementation, you can go fast. I think that would be interesting, but we'll see if that pans out. I like the idea, at least. All right, let's see. Yuki Cat says, did you do any research on creating layouts for libgui? Did you start off simple and figure it out as you went along? I did not do any research on that. I've used Qt a lot in the past, just for making little applications and whatnot on Linux, Windows, and Mac. So just a Qt widget stuff. So I was very familiar with that. Of course, I've also worked on the Qt team for a few years back in the day. And my research when I started building libgui was basically, okay, well, I'm just going to make something that feels like Qt, but maybe avoids some of the things I find annoying about Qt. Let me just turn off the microphone here for a second. All right. So let's see. Tobias says, rebuilding Serenity on the side stream is very choppy. Well, sorry about that. Actually, I think I was rebuilding Serenity on the side somewhere here. But no, I was building Ladybird, but it has finished while I was talking. Johnny said, in my opinion, JIT really improves the performance of current websites, since nowadays many websites use tons of JavaScript. Also, it's worth noting that as of today, there are safe alternatives for building JIT compilers. I mean, safety only goes so far, right? Because at the end of the day, you are throwing runtime generated code at a CPU, and you are allowing the mapping of executable pages at runtime in one way or another. So there are limits to the safety guarantees you can make with a JIT compiler. Let's see. Andrew says, for months I've been using lockdown mode on iOS, which disables JavaScript JIT system-wide. Web performance has been absolutely fine. Cool. Yes, I also use lockdown mode on iOS, and I find that it works just fine. And that makes me very happy, and it fills me with hope that the JIT-less strategy has legs. But That doesn't mean we're home free. We still have to make our JavaScript implementation fast, but we do have to optimize a lot of things. But at the same time, I think there's a path to success there. Lucas says, have you ever considered uploading office hours to a podcast platform? I often listen to it without looking at my screen, and I would love to do this without having the YouTube app open all the time. I never considered doing it with office hours. I guess I could, but it doesn't feel like a podcast, does it? Maybe it does. So in the past, I tried putting, at one point I was putting Car Talks on SoundCloud, but then I ran out of storage space on SoundCloud and they wanted me to pay like a monthly subscription to continue uploading. So I just kind of didn't continue there. But I guess if there's like some easy way to do the conversion and hosting and RSS feeding and everything, there's probably some easy way to do that. I just haven't looked into it, to be honest. So thank you for suggesting it. I'm gonna have to look into that. Thomas Q says, is libweb's WASM slow too? Asking because it's said that WASM is slower than JavaScript currently in the popular web browsers, mostly due to DOM operations, I think. So libweb's WASM is definitely slower than other browsers' WASM, because we don't do any jitting or optimization of WASM. We just interpret it, but there's room for improvement. The mic's still clipping, people are saying. I guess it was a while ago that you said that. I wish that YouTube would have timestamps on these things so I could see when you said it. Can I hover somewhere to see when? No. All right. Let's see. James says, any architecture or hardware or software or operating system that gives me fast compile times is the one I want. My biggest gripe if using Boost is compile times, seconds for individual units. Yeah, I mean, as a systems developer using systems languages, I think that's probably going to be your number one thing you care about. At least that's the number one thing I care about any computer. So as fun as it is to use like smaller, weirder computers, if they don't compile stuff fast, then it gets very tiresome very quickly. Vishnu says, does Yacht have GDB/LLDB debugging support? At what point is it safe to start self-hosting a language? Are there some minimum set of features you need, like debugging? I don't think there are any. You don't need debugging support to self-host a language. Like, as long as you can implement the language in itself and compile the compiler, then you should be good to go. I barely use a debugger personally, so I definitely wouldn't consider it a requirement for anything. And Yacht doesn't have like direct support for debuggers, but since we transpile to C++, then we basically get debugger support for free. It's just that there's that the thick layer of transpilation, making debugging a bit confusing sometimes, because what you're debugging is the generated C++. You're not in the debugger, you're not looking at the original Yacht program, but a translation of it. So there's a bit of fudge from that, but it is debuggable in that sense. Let's see. Weird Dan says, is JIT any less safe than an interpreter? You're still running arbitrary code from the internet, right? Well, a JIT is definitely less safe than an interpreter, because with a JIT, you are generating machine code. So you're taking the code you got from the internet, and you are trying to generate a like x86 or ARM64 or whatever machine instructions corresponding to that program, so that it can run faster. And when you are generating machine code to run, it's like running a compiler at runtime. And then if you have any mistakes in your compiler, so you generate a code that has some problem in it, that can often be exploited in interesting ways. And if you can sort of exploit a bug in a JIT compiler, then you can often convince it to sort of generate whatever code you want to execute directly for the processor, whereas with an interpreter, you have this level of indirection. So when you're interpreting a program, then you are operating at like a higher level of abstraction, higher level of indirection, and so it's typically less likely that you have bugs in the same way or bugs of the same severity as you would in a JIT compiler, just because the risk in an interpreter is lower. I guess that's the short version of the answer. Let's see. Andrew said that it's hard to test out libwebwasm on real websites because mscripton assumes that fetch exists. Right. Well, I hear that Linus has been cooking an implementation of fetch, so we'll see. Dead Rubyroid says, click on 3 dots at the top of the chat. There's an option to toggle timestamps. Ooh. Toggle timestamps. Oh! Dude! Thank you, Dead Rubyroid. You just increased the quality of life by 2x. So, very awesome. Refrag with the super chat. Thank you very much. Saying, happy birthday, SerenityOS. Really nice to see how the project continues to improve every day. Thank you all for the amazing stuff you're doing. Wow, thank you for saying that. And yeah, if anybody missed it, by the way, this week we are celebrating the 4th birthday of SerenityOS, which, as tradition, I commemorated in the annual blog post. So if you haven't seen that, check it out. It's 4 years since we started, and things are very different today than they were 4 years ago, but even more awesome than I ever thought they could be. So I just also have to say thank you all for the amazing stuff that you're doing. Like everybody who participates in some way, it's a privilege to be part of it. James was asking, what are we drinking today? Some nice tea, I hope. Yes, this is Twinings Earl Grey, which I still drink every day. Although I did actually try buying some English breakfast this week, and I've been enjoying that as well. So branching out my my very basic British teas, and now would be a good time to insert ads, which we are, of course, not going to do, but I like highlighting when YouTube is suggesting that I do that. Let's see. Oh, Prata GM wondering if they are shadow banned. You are not shadow banned, although I'm guessing that by swearing in messages, then maybe YouTube is preventing them from showing up or something. Cryptolex was saying, would you learn a programming language only for the reason it fascinates you? I don't know. Maybe. I mean, I would learn anything that fascinates me, I think. But I have never been fascinated by a programming language for its own, like just for it being so fascinating. I'm the type of person who wants to build things, so I see languages as sort of a means to an end, or a tool to achieve building big things. But I have many friends who get into languages just because they're elegant or beautiful, and it seems like a lot of fun. It just doesn't really appeal to me. Simon says, hey dude, just wanted to stop by and tell you that I love your videos and I'm learning so much from them. Thanks. Thank you for saying that, Simon. I'm glad you've been enjoying the videos. That's always nice to hear that people learn something. You would think that if you've been watching my videos, then I will eventually run out of things to show people. But I guess the fact that I'm always learning new stuff means that I always have new stuff to show off and new stuff to show people. And it's kind of a virtuous cycle in that way. Let's see. The Woo Woo says, I was watching your latest browsing hacking and I had the feeling that some of the drudge work should be done with some tool like GitHub Copilot, especially as it is well commented. What do you think? I think tools like Copilot are impressive, but I am very paranoid about using any tool like that because I feel like I wouldn't trust that it got every little detail right, and I would have to carefully read what it wrote anyway. And if I'm gonna do that, I feel like it would be just as easy to just write it myself, I guess. I don't know. Maybe I just have this skeptical paranoia about something that would work just fine, but at least so far, I find it, I wouldn't trust it to do everything precisely right. I think that's my problem. But maybe if I were to spend time with it and use it and grow to trust it, that would change. I don't know. Let's see. Weird Dan says, are you in Europe? I was thinking you are American for some reason, but it's only 9:30 a.m. here. I am in Sweden. Yes, in Sweden. Not in America. Not American. I used to live in America, but I do not anymore. Milan says, how is Yacht progressing? What are the current blockers for Yacht to be used in Serenity? So I think it's not really that there are any major blockers anymore, other than basically we have to unify the some of the standard library stuff, because the Serenity string type and the Yacht string type are incompatible. I think Yacht optionals and Serenity optionals are not entirely compatible, and there are some things like that need to be unified. But in terms of language features, I think it should have, at least for some parts of the system, it should have everything we need. But I guess the thing that I don't know how to approach yet is integrating the build system stuff. And it's one of those things where we just have to sit down and deal with it. But I haven't started looking at that yet. And yeah, I haven't been writing Yacht for over a week, I think. So I have to context switch back into it sometime soon, because I need to get back on top of that. Meanwhile, a bunch of other people have been making great progress on the language, and JT, by the way, has been doing a ton of work towards this Nintendo emulator in Yacht, which is really, really cool. If you have not been following JT's Yacht series, it is very chill, very nice. And yesterday there was even a ridiculously long stream, 7.5 hours, no sleep until Zelda got running on the emulator. But yes, if you're not subscribed to JT's YouTube channel, do subscribe for Yacht and other awesome content. Let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Sam says, now would be a good time to insert an ad, says YouTube, while you're talking about Earl Grey. Mysterious. That is mysterious. People are still complaining about the microphone. Dang it. All right. So I'm just going to turn it down even more in OBS. I'm at like -5 decibels in OBS, which I haven't had this turned down before, so I don't know what the deal is. But I did reboot the computer at some point, which tends to mess things up. So I'm sorry about that. Let's see. Neuromancer Void says, did you use Borland Turbo C++ back in the day? If so, do you remember the version and overall experience? Yes, I did. I used Turbo C++ 3, which was very nice. It was very blue, and I used it to work on DOS programs. Back when I was a very young teenager. I was not very good at C++ as a teenager, but I sort of wanted to learn it because I had heard that it was the thing that all the really cool programmers used to make really serious software. So I wanted to make really serious software myself. So I thought, I gotta learn C++. And Borland Turbo C++ was, I think it was the first C++ compiler I ever had. So I got a book at the library about C++, and I dutifully like typed in the programs and learned about IO streams. And I remember I was making some program that was like a simulation of a hot dog stand where you had to deal with a queue of customers, and you can only have so many hot dogs on the grill at once, and things like that. Let's see. Donata says, hey Andreas, what IDE theme do you use? I use, good question. I always forget what it's called. It's called Material, I think. Color Scheme. Material Darker is the thing I used, which I got from the plugin thingamajig. Here, I think, Material Theme UI. That's the thing I'm using. Ixilom says, I learned a lot by lurking on Discord too. Yes, that is definitely a good way to learn. If you want to hang around the Serenity project and you find the stuff interesting, just hanging out on Discord and like eavesdropping on conversations people are having while they're working on stuff. I'm picking up a lot of interesting stuff just from eavesdropping, so that is good. Andrew pokes out his tongue and says, but the build system is already integrated for Yacht and Serenity. See, look how much I know. Look how much I know. I'm so out of touch with that. Okay, fine. I'm going to talk to you afterwards and figure out exactly how far behind I am. Let's see. Kit Road says, hi Andreas, one of my favorite shortcuts in Serenity is the super drag for move and resize windows. I noticed that you seem to be able to use it without making the start menu pop up. How? How indeed? So you mean, how do I use it in Serenity without getting the start menu to pop up here? How would I use it to make the start menu pop up? I mean, if I press the super key and let go of the super key, then the start menu comes up. But if I press down the super key and I'm still holding it, and now I drag the thing around, the start menu is not going to come up. And if I let go of the super key, it doesn't come up either. So I don't know exactly how you would get the start menu to come up while you're doing this. Yeah, I don't know about that. If you have a way to, if you can explain what you're doing that causes the start menu to pop up when you're super dragging, it might be cool to open a bug report about it. So that we can fix it, because it's not supposed to happen. Johnny Rice says, why you choose C++ over C to build Serenity? Because you can do the same thing in C++ with a fraction of the lines of code that you would use in C. So it's a lot more expressive. You can express a lot of things, and with constructors and destructors, you can use patterns that avoid a ton of bugs that you tend to have in C programs. And I'm just not a big fan of manual memory management. I find that it just feels like tying yourself to an old style of programming that you don't have to. And there's an argument for like writing code in a way that where everything is explicit, so that there are no hidden side effects of things. But I don't find myself convinced by that argument. I think the value of RAII patterns is way higher than the potential value of like a highly explicit programming. So really the reason I use C++ was because I could build a system in C++ and a fraction of the time it would take me to do it in C, with a fraction of the bugs. Let's see. Dr. Oides says, "Hi Andreas, good to know we share the taste for Neapolitan pizza. Two questions maybe already answered. Does Yacht have multi-line comments? And does Serenity change a design decision in the language?" Yacht does not have multi-line comments now, unless somebody has added them. We only have the single-line comments, just because it seems easier to only have single-line comments. I'm not sure that multi-line comments are that useful. And I don't really understand the second question. Does Serenity change a design decision in the language? Not sure what you mean by that. If you mean like, has the goal of integrating Yacht with Serenity changed the design of Yacht? I guess the answer is not really. I mean, yes and no, because the whole purpose of the language is to be integrated into Serenity. That's sort of the reason that the language came to be. So in that sense, like, Serenity has driven every design decision in the language, but at the same time, we haven't changed anything about the design of the language, I think, at least not recently, because of Serenity. But maybe I'm not understanding the question. Arvine says there could be a knob on your mic that you can tweak with that adjusts gain. Yeah, I've been tweaking that. It's definitely nowhere near the top. It's like halfway between the lowest and the highest at the moment, but it's still peaking apparently. Dang it. I don't know what I'm doing to be peaking today. Maybe my voice is just in a peaky mood. Andrew says, I added enable Yacht to Serenity in May or June. Oh, you mean that thing? Yeah, right. I know about that, but I mean, like, if I want to actually build an app that uses the C++ libraries in a straightforward way, then I feel like, is that also something that we support transparently? Because I've seen that and used that to make like Hello World, but what if you want to use one of the CPP libraries? I need to look into this. James says, lurking is a great way to learn and see what's going on with the system. I remember a long time ago lurking in IRC and you talking about some TCP thing. Not certain anymore, but definitely interested me. Right. Yeah, that's definitely the kind of thing that you can just walk in on by lurking. And I think it's a nice thing when you can pick something up just from other people talking about it. Even if you are unfamiliar with the topic, just absorbing some of the terminology that people use when they talk about something has helped me so many times. And like, once I have to work on the thing myself, then I have some terms that I can Google and search for in the code base and stuff like that. It's like almost like absorbing. There's some word for this that I don't remember what it is, but like you're sort of absorbing knowledge by osmosis by just being around people working on something. Let's see. Kit Road says, I'm clearly pressing the super key too much. Sounds like it, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you're just like slapping the super key up and down, then you'll get a start menu. But if you can resist letting go of it once you press down, and instead press on the mouse, you should get a movement going without start menu popping up. Sufi Bros says, any thoughts about re-adding the IRC client? So we don't use IRC for anything in the project, and the IRC application was, I would say it was quite a low quality application, and I wrote the original version of it. Like, it was one of the first apps I made for the system, so it was written in a very clumsy style, and it was never really updated as the libraries in the system matured, so it sort of clung to a very awkward architecture. And when we moved away from even using IRC for the project, it just felt like, okay, well, why do we keep this thing around that needs to be rewritten anyway when it has no relevance to the project? So I guess my feeling about re-adding the IRC client is, if somebody wants to re-add it, then it should be done better, because it was a real clumsy clumser. Like it was not abstracted in a good way. That's really the core issue. Like, it was using very direct access to widgets, and it didn't have like a clean object model with like servers and channels and stuff like that in a good way. Let's see. Dr. Oidy says, while on the go. Oh, does Serenity change the decision in the language on the go? Sure, yeah. I mean, the design of the language has been evolving because it has gaps in it, and it still has gaps. Fewer gaps now, but there are a bunch of things that still need to be figured out, especially when it comes to references, for example, which have not matured that much since my original implementation. We still need to make it possible to do things like iterate over a container without copying each value as you go. I would like to have some model where you can iterate over a container, and your iterator variable works as a reference to the current value. Right now, we always copy each value as you iterate, which is potentially a lot of work if you're iterating over large values. So little things like that need some design work to ensure that it's efficient while also provably safe. Work remains, but one thing I quite like about Yacht is that it's simple enough that you can sort of keep the design in your head, and I think it's better that we build a simple language first that has inefficiencies and some awkwardness, rather than building a complicated language first and try to solve everything up front. I much prefer that we build a simple language that is perhaps a little awkward in some corners, and then iterate on that, which is what we've been doing. So that is working out quite well. Andrew says, yeah, there is some design and legwork to talk to libgui from Yacht. It should work, but right, yeah, it should work, and I think we should be able to get that working. Just have to sit down and actually do it. James says, wasn't that IRC client the last user of the in-process web view? That's what I recall a benefit of removing it being. That was definitely one benefit of removing it. It did use an in-process web view, although it could have been converted to use an out-of-process web view. and if somebody wanted to reintroduce it, that's one of the architectural changes. I would say, okay, well, you need to make it using an out of process web view, because the in process web view is no longer available. So, but things like that. And also, if you're building a chat client, I feel like some amount of sandboxing is appropriate, which also was not a concern in the original hacky thing that I built. But when you're exposing a desktop application to hundreds or thousands of people who can send you text messages, you need to make sure that there is a security mechanism to catch any bugs that people might try to play a prank on you with, right? And the IRC client we had did not do any kind of sandboxing or any real attempt to add security other than like bounce checking the buffers that we were receiving and stuff like that. Let's see. Kit Road was saying, I reproduce it in QEMU on Windows. I'm gonna bug people in Discord about it if I get a chance. Sure. Yeah. Like always, like if you encounter any kind of bug in Serenity, it's always very appreciated that you report it, preferably via GitHub, but sometimes it's easier to ask on Discord. It's also easy for things to get lost if we don't file them on GitHub. And I am not great at this either myself. Like I tend to forget, but I like to say it so that I say it almost more for myself than for other people whenever I say please file bugs. Neuromancer Void says, did you used to read the Lambda the Ultimate blog? I have never read the Lambda the Ultimate. I don't know what that is, but it sounds like a programming languages weblog. Not familiar, but I'm sure it's interesting. I'll leave that open and check it out after the stream. Spooky Putat, which is a fascinating name, says, what are the 4 graphs at the bottom of your screen? These are just my system monitor graphs from Mate. So I guess this one is CPU, we got memory, and I think it's network and IO. So it's just I put them here when we started working on Yacht, because we had this bug where sometimes you would have runaway memory usage in the Rust-based Yacht compiler, and you wouldn't see anything on screen, but suddenly you had a Yacht compiler process using 60 gigs of memory or whatever. And in order to proactively be able to catch that happening, I added some graphs down here so I could sort of see if the CPU or memory was going crazy. And it happened a couple of times that I was able to catch something spiraling out of control. So now I've just left them here because I don't know, they give me some feeling of awareness, I guess. Like is everything going in a reasonable way on the machine? Let's see. James says, I'm most excited about the transition to x86 64 / removing x86 support. Makes Serenity more modern, but also puts fire underneath people to fix and implement x86 64 things like USB and libx86. Yeah, that's a really good point. I am also happy about the path where we get rid of like 32-bit support. I'm not sentimental about 32-bit, which some people expected me to be that for some reason, but I really don't care that much. And I think there are just a lot of benefits of streamlining the system and getting rid of the legacy 32-bit code paths, because x86 is the only 32-bit CPU that we support. So by getting rid of that, we don't have to deal with 32-bit pointers anywhere, and not just in the kernel, but also in stuff like libjs, where we have like the the NAND boxing that's happening in our JavaScript value implementation. It is, as far as I know at least, it's kind of suboptimal on 32-bit. Yeah, we have to do like trickery on 32-bit, which is a lot easier to do on 64-bit. And various other things. But as you say, there are some things that are totally not working, like libx86 doesn't work, user space emulator does not support 64-bit, but those are all things that we have to fix, have to improve and extend to 64-bit support. So that is going to be fun. Spooky Patat says, I've been enjoying JT's Yachtness Monster videos because the Yacht language looks awesome and it makes sense to have those graphs there. Yes, it does. Yeah, I also enjoy JT's NES series because it's so fun to see the language just being used and being used in a context that I wouldn't be taking it, because I have all kinds of things I want to do with it, but building an NES emulator wouldn't be in the first things I do. So it's very fun to see it used for that. And something I like about JT's videos is that the comments are so positive, like so many people saying, oh, this language looks so nice, and that is heartwarming. And here is Gunnar saying, I left all those x86 64 to-dos as an exercise for the reader. Yes, well, you would do that, Gunnar, but it's good to have you back, by the way. See, Gunnar has recently come back to us and is now working on AArch64, I think, most recently, which is very exciting. Let's see. So SamU698 was saying, as of recent news, Rust will be in the Linux kernel. So for curiosity, what are your thoughts on Rust in Serenity and Rust in general? So I don't really have strong feelings about Rust. I've written a lot more Rust this year, so I've gotten reasonably familiar with the language, but I also came to the conclusion that it's not a good fit for Serenity, primarily because it's just not, the language doesn't lend itself well to building the type of GUI programs that we do. We have a lot of object inheritance hierarchies with our widget trees, and a lot of virtual dispatch and things like that. And those sort of traditional object-oriented programming patterns are really, really awkward to do in Rust. And I didn't want to add this layer of awkwardness to the project where, like, oh yeah, well, we're going to use Rust now, and GUI programming is going to be super awkward, but at least we're using Rust. It didn't seem like the right strategy for a project like Serenity, which is supposed to be about the joy of programming, right? And for that reason, and other reasons as well, but that was one of the main motivating reasons that I didn't want to use Rust in Serenity. But I did port Rust to Serenity, and I prototyped various parts of the system in Rust just to mess with it and test things out. But ultimately, it's not really suited to our programming model. And I messed around with other languages as well, but in the end, it seemed to me like if we really want something that is a perfect 100% fit for Serenity and the type of programs that we want to write, then we have to make our own language so that it can be guaranteed to be perfect for what we need. And of course, that is what Yacht is all about. It's just taking all of the good ideas from other languages and merging them into one language that fits our use case like a glove. Let's see. Laurinas says, loved your most recent car talk. It's really great to see such incredible progress on SerenityOS browser. I hope one day it replaces Firefox and such as the de facto browser. Right. Well, we'll see about that. Um, I'm obviously super excited about the progress that we're making everywhere in the system. In the browser stack, but also in the language stack and in the kernel, in the user space of SerenityOS, the desktop, and everything. Like, there's this incremental improvement constantly that everything is just improving over time, and it's a beautiful thing. And sometimes some parts improve faster than other parts, and sometimes some parts stand still for a while, but everything eventually starts moving again, and that is beautiful. And we'll see about replacing Firefox as the de facto browser. That's definitely going to take a lot of work before we can even claim feature parity with any of the major browsers. Dr. Oide says, along with the YouTube ads message, the weekly Rust question is a tradition. That's right. And also the weekly plan question. I feel like we had at least one of those today. But that's just part of the stream. And somebody told me once that live streaming is all about answering the same questions over and over with a smile on your face. And it's not entirely like that because a lot of the same people come to the streams. So, the same people are not going to ask the same questions every week. But it is true that you always have new people coming in, and it's just the nature of the format of live streams is that you have new people drifting in and out. And if you can't handle being asked the same question every week, then live streaming might not be for you. But I feel like I'm handling that pretty well. But of course, that doesn't mean we can't have fun with it. So, indeed, it's a tradition. John says, "Keep up the awesome work." Thank you, John. Keep up the awesome work too, whatever you're doing. I'm sure it's awesome. And oh my goodness, MSCL RHD. I feel like last time I asked you about your name and you said that it's like initials? Muscular head? Is that what I wanted to call it? MSCL RHD says, that's what Mozilla did with Rust for Firefox, and JetBrains did with Kotlin for IntelliJ. So there is precedence for creating your own language to use in the project you're working on. Indeed there is. And I think Serenity is definitely the type of project that can take on making its own language, because it just makes sense, when people hear that SerenityOS is making a language, I don't think many people found it too surprising. Like, it's just very much in character. Soul says, which areas of SerenityOS are drawing the most developer attention in the past week or two? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I have been head down and working on CSS for the last couple of weeks and making pretty good progress on Twitter. Like, I'm just very set on getting Twitter working better and better. And I'm not on my latest development branch here, so I don't have all the latest fixes, but the site is coming together. I still have not figured out why they're not sending us images, though. Originally, I thought that it was some like user agent thing that they don't like our user agent, so they're not going to send us images. But I've been messing around with spoofing our user agent, and they still don't send us the images. So that is something I would love to know, because I know that if we just get the images, then we can do a pretty good job of the layout, because I have I have a copy of Twitter that I have made by like saving the page in another browser, and at least you can see that we can display an image here. So there's just something. For some reason, they're not sending them to us. I need to dig into that. Anyway, that was not at all what you asked. You asked what was getting the most developer attention in the past week or two. And I don't know the answer. I think the big reason that I don't know the answer is because we are right in the middle of the month. And the last day of every month, that's when I have an answer to this question, because that's when I look at all the commits and see what everybody else has been working on. But right now we are right between in the middle of the month, where I am clueless about that sort of thing. Let's see. Spooky Potat says, what does your wife think of Serenity at the moment? That's a good question. I think last thing I heard her saying about it was that it's a very cool project, which I appreciated her saying. My wife, by the way, who is on YouTube and has made the theme song for my hacking videos. Let me shill her YouTube channel if you haven't checked it out already. This is the song that you probably are familiar with from my hacking videos. Let's see. Zvonimir says 80-20 rule, 80% repeating questions, 20% new. Yeah, you know, I wish it would be the other way around, but yeah, I don't know about 80-20, but it's not quite the other way around either. Andrew says we need to give the plan a cute name. Lady Plan, Plan Buggy, Buggy Plan, Ladybird. We'll see about that. At some point, somebody called it the P word, which I I enjoyed. Andy says, what are you most excited about at the moment? I think just the future in general. I'm very excited and hyped up about where we'll be a year from today. Because working on that happy birthday post for the system really put me into that headspace where, like, oh my goodness, look at all the stuff we did in a year. Just think what we will have done a year from today. Oof. And sort of letting the imagination run wild a little bit, like what might we be able to do. And it's left me excited and hyped up about what comes next, which I'm not even sure what does come next, because there are so many people working on it and everybody's just doing what they feel like, which means that nobody knows where we'll be a year from today, but that's part of the fun. Let's see. Weird Dan says, is Ladybird the browser in SerenityOS, or does it use a different browser? I looked it up and it's using Qt instead of the Serenity GUI library. Right. So the browser applications are two separate things. Ladybird at the moment is a Qt application that you can use on cross-platform context. And the SerenityOS browser is using libGUI. So those are two separate code bases, but they are sort of slowly converging. We are finding ways to share more and more code. Most recently, as of this week, they're now also using the web content process, or if that was last week, I forget. But they're now using the same multi-process architecture and infrastructure. But there's still a bunch of stuff that needs to be merged between the two. And as Andrew says, it's the same browser engine, different GUI front end. That's essentially it. And I would like to see the GUI front end shrink as much as possible, but the strategy for that is a little bit unclear. Like, what is the best way to do that? But we'll see. Ali says that Ladybird is a cute application. It is true. It is true. All right, so it is 5:08 and I gotta go, so we're gonna close up the stream here. Thank you all very much for coming, for hanging out. And thank you for the super chats and the folks joining the Yak Herd and all that, and everybody for coming. And I hope that we'll all have a great weekend. If you end up working on Serenity or Ladybird or Yacht or any of our projects, then come hang out on Discord and share what you're doing, because it's super fun when people post screenshots of what they're working on and just talking about stuff. And if you have questions about SerenityOS, then, come ask on Discord as well. Basically, come hang out on Discord if you feel like it. And I will see you all next time. Bye.